Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're now tuned in to KJ Live. I'm Chris Johnson. Today's guest on the show is Long Beach State Athletics Director Andy Fee. He was hired in April of 2017 as the 12th director in that program's history. And in just going on 4 short years, they've won two national championships under his direction. Andy, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my man?
Chris, honored to be on with you today. Excited to talk about sports and athletics and whatever topic you want to put on the table. But it's an honor. I grew up watching you ball. I know who I'm talking to, and for me, honor for me to be here with you.
Oh, man. So where are you from originally, Andy? What's your background?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Morristown, New Jersey, so East Coast. My dad was born in Brooklyn. Most of my family's there. And early in my childhood, my dad was transferred his job out to California, and we actually settled in South Orange County in Dana Point. So grew up really, sports, playing youth sports, all the different sports down in Orange County, Dana Point, and had a great childhood, and most of it kind of like you, although you're a way better athlete than me. But my life centered as a youth on sports, playing almost every sport I possibly could.
And what did Dad do? And how many siblings do you have?
Yeah, so my dad worked in investments, so investment manager,
Okay.
Wall Street kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
it was interesting watching what he did. You learn maybe from. I mean, now your dad's a little different than my dad. You kind of followed in the footsteps, but my dad, he loved his job. He's retired now, but I was about sports, and so my dad was super supportive, and my mom with that. I have an older brother, 2 years older. So growing up playing sports, I had that older brother, which in some ways was great. In other ways, it was a pain, let me tell you. But some epic battles between my brother and I, and everything that we did because we were so close in age. But yeah, I grew up playing sports. My mom was a huge sports fan. When I was really little, I remember when we first moved to California, she would be, ironing clothes and she would have the Dodger game on. And so I would sit there with my mom, sitting there listening to Vince Scully call the Dodger game, and she loved sports, maybe even more than my dad. So my mom was a huge proponent of us playing sports. I mean, she signed us up. I mean, I loved playing sports, but it all started with my mom signing us up for like AYSO soccer or whatever it was, and
Yeah.
went from there.
Yeah. Speaking of competitive households, I mean, I can totally relate to what you're talking about because I grew up with a lot of brothers and we competed at everything, man. I mean, it didn't matter who's getting to the kitchen first, who's going to finish their food first, who can, jump the furthest off the diving board into the pool. I mean, everything was a competition and it definitely bred that competitive spirit. But going back to your mom, a lot of people would think that that was kind of a unique thing that your mom was a sports fan, but I share a similar deal with my grandmother. So my grandmother, my dad's mom, is like the biggest sports fan you can ever imagine, Andy. She literally would get the paper, sports section, LA Times, every single day, go through the box scores, baseball and basketball, and she could quote every stat that you can imagine. So I totally know how that thing went. But I'm curious, what sport did you play, and what sport was your best sport growing up?
Probably golf. So, I played soccer, baseball, football, golf. And golf is kind of funny. It was the sport I didn't really put the most time into. And looking back, I probably should have. But it just
Yeah,
wasn't, it was just, I don't know. I had one friend who golfed, but we all played other sports. Like golf wasn't really,
sure,
the
sure.
thing, till I was like a senior in high school. And that's really a love that I have. And I don't get to golf as much as I would like, but golf would really be what I have that true affinity for. And again, I love playing all those other sports. I was a jack of all trades, a master at none, so to speak. But golf really has turned out to be the most passionate thing that I enjoy, other than running. So I hated running, Chris. I don't know how you were, but like when coach was like on the line run, it was like, come on now. I do
Yeah.
not want any of
Ugh.
that.
Ugh, ugh.
But as I've gotten older, and I use running as a cathartic tool for me, I
Yeah,
probably
for sure.
run probably 45 miles a week. I try to run at least
Wow.
6 miles a run. I live about 3 miles from the beach here in Long Beach, so I run down to the beach and back. It's about 6 miles, but I use that as my kind of
Yeah.
alone time. I don't, I think about my day. How am I going to solve projects? You just get bombarded by
Yes.
everything in life, right? Social media, your phone, your email, your text
Yes.
messages. It's that one time in a weird way that I get some time to kind of just think about what I need to do.
Yeah.
But growing up, it turned out again it was almost too late in my career. Golf, I love golf. I think if I had probably put more time into it, that would have been the most successful sport for me. But maybe that's why I'm an
Yeah. I,
administrator, not an athlete or a coach.
it's okay. It's okay. There are worse things to be. But listen, the thing about running, man. I mean, so as I've gotten older, right? I used to put in the miles. My peak was probably when I was living in New York. I was staying with Steve Lavin. I was out there with St. John's head coach Steve Lavin. So I'm staying at his place. He's living in Soho. So I would do this run where I'd run to Grand Central Station or wherever that was, but I'd be running up Broadway and Bleecker and all these crazy streets in the middle of the street. I'd be dodging taxis and all that. I was just kind of psycho, but it was a 3 or 4 or 5 mile run. And Andy, when I tell you that experience, just running and self care, how it just opens your perspective, your mind, and really prepares you. It grounds you a little bit. And I loved it. The thing I noticed about New York too, and then I'll move on to another question. When I was in Soho, man, it was like running on that concrete was like running on pillows. It was like soft sort of concrete. I don't know if you've ever ran out there or had that experience, but the stuff is soft. Do you know what's up with that?
Yeah, no, it is kind of funny. I do mostly road running. I've done some trail running, but most of what I do is road running. So, there is the pounding, so to speak, that you think about when you're running a lot. But it is interesting the different surfaces and the subsurfaces of what they're comprised with, because with the right shoe and the right surface, you can run forever on hard surfaces.
Yeah.
You need that cushioning. So you either have to have that shoe that's built and designed to have extra cushion, or it can be sometimes just how they pour the concrete. Maybe the mixture that they use. That it's not
Yeah.
always the same, because I've run in lots of cities like you, and sometimes the runs are easier, sometimes the runs are harder.
Absolutely. Andy, when you're in high school, what did you want to be when you grew up? What were your goals and aspirations?
Yeah, so I really thought about the law. I'm very interested in politics. That was what I studied in college. I enjoyed history, and I thought maybe the law might be something that intrigued me. I watched Law and
As
Order
a
with
lawyer?
my parents
As a lawyer? On
as
the
a
lawyer
lawyer.
side of things? Or
Yeah, and
okay.
so I thought that was going to be what I was going to go to, but it did not. And it's kind of funny. I get that question all the time. It's almost like, how did you end up where you ended up? And I have friends who have had such linear trajectories, meaning they was all lined up and they knew how it was going to be. For me, no, I figured it out, I guess is the best way to describe it. I did not have a plan at all.
Wow. No plan at all. So how did you figure it out though? Like what
So
so you had no plan, Andy?
zero. Total train wreck, right? So here's Andy. He's going to graduate. What is he going to do? I have no plans. I'm working some part time job. What are you going to do? Well, I had worked part time as a student in the athletic department at Arizona State and worked events. And I figured, hey, get paid to go watch, Chris Johnson play basketball. Heck yeah, I'd do that. Like I got to watch all kinds of players come through Wells Fargo Arena, and so I loved it. So as I graduated, there was a job that opened up, and my boss at the time was like, "Hey, are you interested? You would be great for this job." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I don't have anything else going on. What the heck am I going to do? Say no?" So I started working in the event and
Right, right.
operations side, and I loved it, and I was comfortable in it, and I felt like I was good at it. And it kind of like one thing led to another. I describe my journey. So I am today sitting here as an athletic director. And if I rewind to Andy at 22, Sure, I knew what the athletic director was and what, but it was the analogy I would have is a roadmap. I was in Los Angeles and I knew New York was being an athletic director. It was so far away. And I was like, well, I can drive my car 100 miles a day, meaning, okay, I'll start with this job, then I'll get to the next job. So I always focused more on the next job and doing my current job as best as I could to set me up for that next step. But I really enjoyed it. I got satisfaction. I like to serve. I like being part of a team. Like I mentioned, I was never the superstar, but I love being a teammate. I felt like I was a great teammate. I had your back. I'd go to war for you. I love team sports. So to me, it was the best job ever. And in a weird way, I feel like I was meant to do this. I just didn't know it at the time. And so my career grew from there, but that's where the seed started, with a simple conversation and are you interested, to where I am today. In a weird way, I wonder if I had never run into my boss at that time and had that conversation, maybe I'd be teaching high school social science and coaching the golf team. I don't know.
So event operations, talk about what that entails, just the type of, ground floor, I guess, experience that you gained doing that.
Yeah, so I loved it. It requires a lot of logistics, planning, the operations side. When I was at Arizona State, my job was to help put on the events, so to speak. So make sure that if we had a football game at Sun Devil Stadium, do we have the ushers? Do we have the chain gang with the down markers? Do we have the electricians on site, that if something sideways happens? I mean, literally the event planner. That's what it is. So my work at that time was really behind the scenes. No one would ever really know I was probably there. They would never see me. But all of the work so when a fan shows up to Staples Center, there is a crew, an army of people behind the scenes that most people don't know. They might see the ticket taker, the usher,
Mm-hmm.
but all the people underneath, the seating area making all of that happen was where I started. And it's always been a love. I still, to this day, when I have discussions with my staff, I'll put that hat on and I'll get into the weeds on, well, how are we running that event? What are you going to do? What are you going to do if this happens?
Now, how does staff respond when you get down into the weeds, though?
Well, I tell people, and I am very open about this, I have the micromanager gene. Straight up. I do.
Oh.
I do. But I hate to be micromanaged. So I work very hard not to micromanage. I want to empower my staff. So I think if you ask my staff, I'm not a micromanager. I do have that gene, but what I've learned is this. I use this analogy with my staff. I love chocolate chip cookies. There's a 25,000 ways to probably make chocolate chip cookies. At the end of the day, what I ask for my staff is to deliver chocolate chip cookies. I can give Chris the recipe and say, do it the way Andy does, or I can say, Chris, deliver those cookies, and Chris is going to go have his recipe. And at the end of the day, with my staff, I tell them the results are what I'm interested in. But I tell them too, you can get into the weeds super easy. For me, I can get there.
Absolutely. Andy, so who are some of the, when you were at Arizona State, who are some of the, basketball players, football players that we might know that were playing around the time that you were there?
Yeah. So for me, do you remember the name Mario Bennett? He was,
Oh my gosh. Of course.
Super Mario, Jeremy Veal, James Bacon, Coach Frieder was coaching.
Ron Riley,
Man,
George McCorn.
Big time. So, I was watching those guys, and they Coach Frieder had some really good teams, good squads, some battles with you guys. I know that. And so that's, I loved being at Wells Fargo Arena. Again, I was as a student and then I was working there. And so for me, I had the best of both worlds.
Quick aside on ASU, I was this close to committing to Arizona State. George McCorn, rest in peace. He was my guy. He was one of my favorite people of all time, assistant coach under Coach Frieder, and they offered me, I was going to go. I was going to come out there, and they were going to let me play my game. No, they were going to let me play my game. Tempe was off the hook. I heard all about Tempe, and I was just like, oh, yeah, ASU, baby. I had some shorts. You remember you remember ASU used to host this thing called the I think it was the BCI. It was like this big
Yeah.
remember that? Yeah. So I used to come out there for that event and all types of stuff. So ASU, I always loved some ASU. And then Jake the Snake Plumber. You cannot
Oh,
forget Jake the Snake Plumber.
I
Okay.
was in I was in the stands when they beat Nebraska.
Woo!
And that was the most amazing feeling. The year before, they lost at Nebraska 77-28.
Wow.
So that was an amazing game to be at. And, it was one of those games, and you've probably been there as an athlete. It was just that night was electric, even before the kickoff, where you just had this feeling. You're like, I don't know what it is, but I think something special is going to happen tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the most amazing games I've ever been to in my life. Now, I will say that year too, ASU played at UCLA and came back to win the game. They were down 28-7, and
Oh, come
Jake the
on.
Snake caught a pass on a throwback. And,
Throwback.
and I was there because my buddies went to UCLA. So I was in the student section at UCLA, and I was standing in there, and they were just killing me with, ASU was
Yeah, yeah,
down. And then they came back, and, I had to sit there and be quiet because I didn't want, to get,
yeah.
beat up in the student
Pummeled.
section.
Pummeled.
So but I, there were, being a student, and that's where my love of college sports came from. For me, I've been around pro sports a lot of my life,
Yeah,
but I've never worked in it because I've got that love of what the student athlete experience is about.
yeah,
And even though I didn't experience it, I got to see it and
yeah,
believe in it. So it's been something full circle for me to come back and be to lead a department
yeah.
and really serve our student athletes, because that's my job, is to serve them.
Yeah. It's awesome memory. You just took it back, and then I'm gonna cap this Jake the Snake stuff story with one more little story. So a friend of ours, myself and Jelani McCoy, was Daryl Russell, rest in peace, the big defensive tackle that went to SC. So he had a draft party at a place in Westwood. But he invited all his buddies, and you had like 9 of the first 15 picks of the first round were at the
Oh,
party.
wow.
Jake the Snake was one of them. We got to hang out with Jake the Snake, and I swear, when I'm telling you, I was like a fan. We're contemporaries, but I mean, he was like larger than life for us at UCLA. He was the man, and so it was a lot of mutual respect, and it was a great memory, Andy, about that. I want to talk about your time at University of San Diego in that athletic department, just how that went. USD is not known as an athletics type of school, except for maybe a couple of sports. They are known for a major basketball pipeline, though, as far as the NBA is concerned. But just talk about overall what the University of San Diego experience was like for you.
Yeah, that was interesting because I went from a mega university, just in size and scope, to a small private Catholic school of, I think, 7,000 students. So from like 55,000 students and, the Pac-12 experience of football to that small private liberal arts school. And so it was a little bit of a shock. I remember my wife, they play at the lower FCS level. And I remember we went to the first football game, and my wife was looking at me like, "What are we doing? This is not Sun Devil Stadium." And I'm like, "Babe, this is good. Trust me, this is good for us." And but it was a really great experience, and one that shaped my life. I worked there for 8 years, and I always tell people,
Wow.
I feel I grew so much in those 8 years because being a smaller school, you have the opportunity to wear more hats. And I think my skill set developed there, that I wasn't just, working in event operations. I had an opportunity to supervise sports, meaning, the coach has a daily sports supervisor they work with to interface with on all the things they need. So I got to build up experience being a sports
Okay.
supervisor, having that experience. I helped in fundraising, I helped with capital projects, and it was out of necessity. You just have less people. But I think that helped me get to where I am today, because if I had stayed at ASU, I probably would have just been in a silo doing that event operations thing and not had a chance to kind of broaden my skill set.
And so in that experience at UCSD prepared you, you feel like, for your next position at UCSB. You got a promotion, correct? You went to UCSB. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I loved working at San Diego, and things were great, but I knew that to get the next job, the people above me, they weren't leaving. They weren't going anywhere in their career. They're at that point that, they weren't leaving anytime soon. So it was kind of like, stay there, do what I'm doing, be happy. Hey, that's fine. But I knew I still wanted to keep growing. So an opportunity at UC Santa Barbara opened up, and that was a promotion, promotion title, the whole thing, and also some responsibilities. I went up there to help with some capital projects, construction, athletic projects, but then also morph into fundraising and the external side. So I kind of made a huge shift. I was internal operations, and then when I went to Santa Barbara, this whole kind of stratosphere, this whole universe opened up around the external side of the house, around fundraising, ticket sales, all of those things that I had never done before.
How challenging was it for you as an athletic administrator working in fundraising to raise funds at a smaller school like that for an athletic program?
Yeah, so you don't have the leverage. I talk to Josh Rebholz at UCLA all the time, and he always goes, "Andy, I don't know how you guys do it." You can sit there and go, "Well, hey, if you want, center court, this is what you got to do, right?" There's a demand, a big demand. There's thousands and thousands of people that want those seats, right? We don't have the same. We have a lot of affinity here at Long Beach State, but it's not the same. So we have to really sell it, so to speak, a little differently. What I talk about is investing in people, because regardless of whether you're at UCLA or you're at Long Beach State, you're going to invest in a student to get their degree, to change their life. So what I try to focus on isn't necessarily, we talk about winning, we want to win. So that's certainly part of what we talk about, but really the more holistic side of it. I talk all the time. I believe that we're a leadership academy. That's really what we're doing here. That's what we're trying to do. We're here. People ask me all the time, what are you doing? And I boil it down real simple. We're here to cultivate leaders and champions in everything that we do, on the court, in the pool, on the field, but in the classroom, in the community. That, sometimes when I meet with recruits, and you know this, you better than I, you're thinking, okay, the next 4 or 5 years, right? Like, what is that? But what I tell them is you also have to pivot. You got to think about not the next 4 to 5, but 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What is that experience going to be like wherever you are to set you up for the rest of your life? Because, hey, you can go be a pro, but hey, everybody's career ends at some point, right? Mine ended a lot earlier than yours, but everybody's career ends at some point. Sure. So what are you doing to put people in a position to change their life? And what I love, really here, we have so many first generation students across the board at Long Beach State. You are literally changing some people's lives that without athletics and an athletic scholarship, they would not be able to get that degree. And when I tell people, they ask me, well, what's your favorite event or your favorite sport? I go, commencement. I have the honor. I sit on the president's cabinet. I get to sit up on the dais. Wow. And we actually hand scrolls out to, well, we did before COVID, but you hand scrolls out to the graduates. And I get to hand the scroll to the president, and then the president, but I get to sit there and say, oh, here comes Chris Johnson, men's basketball. And it makes me so proud to be able to stand there and watch that athlete walk across that stage with a diploma to change their life. And, back to your question, it's not easy to raise money for anybody, even UCLA, it's tough work. But we have a great story to tell. And that story focuses on the student athlete experience, providing the best possible experience we can.
Talk about your athletic department's response to COVID for the student athletes.
Yes, so that's been a challenge. So in LA County, this is that I've had this conversation a lot, and it's a great question. It's been really unique for us. So in the county of Los Angeles, there are 2 cities that actually have city health departments, Pasadena and Long Beach. Everybody else falls under the county, and Dr. Barbara Ferrer, who's the director of public health for the county. Well, we do adhere to the county, but we also have a city director of public health. And so the layers of getting our teams up and running have been gargantuan. Listen to this. So our both basketball programs, the first time they stepped into the pyramid to practice indoors was November 17th. We were practicing out on the tennis courts. We constructed outdoor tennis courts, which, trust me, really, I don't even know if that helps. Probably hurt. But we could not even get inside to the pyramid until November 17th. The first practice, November 17th, indoors. And our first game was November 30th. So, it was a real challenge. We finally just got access to the weight room. So our basketball teams did literally nothing until October 15th. That's when we were allowed to go out on the tennis courts and do some activity. But it started with, so you and your roommate could shoot and rebound for each other, but you couldn't rebound for somebody else that you didn't live with. I mean, the rules and the protocols were super strict. So we were way behind everybody else, even in the county. So it's been a challenge. Now, you can look at things two ways. Is it going to break you or is it going to make you? And what we talked about was we can't control the virus. We can't control COVID. We can't control what public health does. What we can control is how we respond to it. So we worked as hard as we can. That's been the message with our athletes, is to focus on our response to all this, not get into, how many points you're scoring, like not to get dragged down by minutia details. This is a pandemic. It's global. It's bigger than that. Be grateful for what we do have. And I wish we had been practicing earlier in the pyramid, but you know what? We finally did get in there. And so we appreciate it, but it's been a challenge. We have spent probably close to $800,000 in testing, which is a lot for a mid-major school. We test everybody 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm included in
every student athlete.
Every student athlete. So if you play
every
tennis,
student athlete and coach.
Everybody within kind of the cohort. So it's about 521 people total that are testing. And that's an antigen test on Mondays and Fridays with a PCR test on Wednesday. And because the city has been pretty strict about it, tennis is considered a low risk sport for transmission, but we have to test everybody no matter what sport you are. So whether you're basketball and you're sweating and leaning on everybody, to tennis or golf where you don't touch anybody, everybody tests 3 times a week. So it's been a challenge, but you know what? We take it as a challenge. That's fine. Throw whatever you want at us. You can knock us down 10 times, but we're going to get up 11 times. So today, I talked to someone today. This experience has been about resiliency, about grit. Our athletes could have folded up shop and made excuses about, what's the point? I'm not going to try. I'm not going to train. Like, we'll just get after it next year. We haven't seen that. Our student athletes have tried. I looked, maybe we haven't won every game or match, and it's not because of effort. It's probably because we haven't been able to get in the weight room. And those things that do really matter have been a challenge.
When you talk about your student athletes, I think about, because my son has spent the last 4 years on the University of Oregon's basketball team as a student athlete. I think about what he went through emotionally, mentally, this past year. Talk about the support that your athletic department has provided to the student athletes outside of, the practicing part, the mental side of things, the emotional side of things.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. And while we were limited to Zoom, really, so we couldn't gather, teams couldn't get together. They weren't practicing. But what we could do is Zoom. Now, Zoom is not perfect. It doesn't replace, you and I sitting in the same room and having that interaction. But we were doing multiple Zooms a week to check on them. How are you doing? We came up with some kind of what I call kind of the professional development. Let's work on the things we can work on. Let's work on the mental side. So we had some, sports psychologists come in and talk to the student athletes, talked about coping. as an athlete and just as a student as well, because they're doing everything virtually in the pandemic. But we, from the outset, knew it was going to be a challenge. I mean, initially, we could just tell, and people try and put up a brave face and say it doesn't bother or it doesn't affect them, but we could tell. When you talk to your buddy, something's going on, right? So we made sure that we had resources available through the university. They have a great setup. Um, it's called CAPS. It's counseling and psychological services, and we set up appointments. And
Awesome.
we tried to also take away the stigma around mental health, and that hey, we don't make an issue out of someone spraining an ankle. So why are we making an issue with something around mental health? That's not right. So we also worked on some group discussions around what it is, how we can destigmatize it, how we can be there for one another. So it's been a challenge, but mental health has probably been one of the most important things we've dealt with this year.
Yeah, putting myself into the shoes of the, current day student athlete, I can't imagine what they went through getting everything taken away. Then we played, then we're not. You can do this, you got to test. I mean, it is unbelievable what this generation has had to go through. And I was one of those guys that kind of looked at this generation sort of like, hey, you guys are soft. And I used to be kind of a hater, Andy. But after I've seen their response to COVID,
Yeah.
I am truly their biggest supporter. I mean, I couldn't imagine making it through this. Think about it, Andy. If they took everything away from us when we were growing up, like how would we
Oh,
make it?
no way, no way. I think, and that's what I said. I talk to the student athletes a lot, and I would say, hey, what I'm sharing with you isn't easy, and I get that. We're asking to limit your interactions with others. We're basically saying, you can't have a social life. Honestly, it's crazy as it sounds. Our basketball players were not seeing their parents, their family members. They're sitting, with their roommate on Thanksgiving in their apartment. And you try to do as much as you can, but you can't replace that. And to your point, I'd love to sit here. I'm 46-year-old Andy, and I'd love to sit here and say, oh, well, 20-year-old Andy would comply with everything that 46-year-old Andy is doing. And I sit here and I remind myself and go, no way. Like,
No way, no way.
I'd like to think I wasn't a knucklehead, but I was. And so, the amount of sacrifice, to your point, that they were asked to make, I can't even imagine, as you said, how I would have responded. I wish I could sit here and guarantee, like, oh, I would have been no problem. So I've been really proud of our athletes and the sacrifices that they made. I mean, think about this. We tested our basketball teams together, combined, total of about almost 2,100 times. We had one student athlete test positive and one staff member and one manager. So we had three people that tested positive out of 2,100 tests. Like, that's staggering to me.
It is.
And the sacrifice that it took to stay healthy and COVID negative, this, you talk to guys and women who are playing sports, it's not easy. I mean, you see how many teams are getting shut down and pauses,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had to deal with some. We've had some false positives and things like that. But I am so proud of our student athletes and coaches. That's one of the things I talk with our donors a lot. Is I tell them, I go, you don't even understand how proud I am of them. That if you thought they worked hard and they did whatever it took to win and do it in the classroom and on the court, triple that, quadruple it, what they're doing today. And I'll be forever grateful for this year in a weird way, because it's shown me how tough, yeah, much like you, I kind of was like, oh, they're soft and this, and, and I tell you what,
Yeah.
they have shown me how resilient and how much grit they have.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Staying on the current day student athlete, um, what is your take or feelings about student athlete led coalitions that focus on shining light on different societal inequities, inequalities that exist, systemic racism, things like that. Corey Close, for example, over at UCLA, the head women's basketball coach, like sponsored a program within her own team called More Than a Dream, the women's basketball team. And it was a student athlete led coalition, and they were an advocacy group for issues that they felt passionate about. What is your thoughts about that at Long Beach State?
Well, I think we have a duty to empower our student athletes to use their voice. You know, I am not one of these, and I can't stand the people that are the shut up and dribble people. I believe that student athletes have a voice, should use their voice. I mean, I'm not going to force people to use it, but they should be free to use their voice. I want them. That's part of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to educate, we're trying to create great citizens for our society. And with that comes the opportunity to shine a light on those things. We've worked really hard to provide resources for our student athletes. I mean, you kind of have the trifecta, right? You've got social injustices going on. You've got the economy. You've got the pandemic. You look at all these things that these student athletes are facing, and one of them is what does our society look like, right? How do we treat one another? And the reality is, and I've to be honest, I told you I'm a little outspoken. I've had some pretty rough discussions with some of our supporters who, we've been out front to support Black Lives Matter, our campus, our university, our president. We're very open with that. I look at our we have about 66% of our student athletes are people of color. And so, across the rainbow, Asian Pacific Islanders, Black. I mean, we've got Native American. I mean, we have, a rainbow of people. And when I talk to some of our donors and, they go, "Oh, Black Lives Matter." And I go, do you not watch who's on the court? You don't know what that person goes through. I grew up in privilege. I acknowledge that. I never worried about anything. I'm a runner. We talked about that earlier, Chris. We have a head coach, and that coach lives in Orange County, and Black man, and he runs, and he keeps his driver's license when he runs, so that if someone stopped him, he could prove that he lives in that neighborhood. He shared that with me last fall, and it blew me away. I run every day, Chris. I have not once ever thought about running through my neighborhood and someone questioning why I was running through my neighborhood. And I don't know what I don't know. And so what I've tried to share with a lot of people is we have to listen. And I've tried to do as much as listening as I can to understand what our Black student athletes and coaches and staff are going through. What those Asian Pacific Islanders who are also going through some terrible things. And it's my responsibility as a leader to be there, to be an ally, to be an advocate, and to use my voice, because it's easy for someone like me not to say a word. I can just kind of sit over in the corner and not say a word. And it's not as though I'm saying as though I have the answers. But what I think is I need to acknowledge that the system is not working, that whether it's, the legal system, the healthcare system, it is not designed for a large segment of our population. And I can't be blind to it. I can't be quiet to it. So what I've tried to do is to be an ally, to provide a forum for our student athletes to use their voice. We've had several projects that have been led by our student athletes. One of them, a big one, was around voting in November for the election and registering people to vote, also to help people get out to vote. So it's something that we have to continue to work on. This isn't going away, unfortunately. We want it to go away, but this isn't some flash in the pan where, we're going to solve this in a year. This is systemic structural issues that, have to be addressed. And you know what? Our students are smart. They know what's going on. In a lot of ways, they're way better than my generation. And that's the positivity that I look forward to, is that this younger generation, they're going to fix what my generation obviously did not do a good enough job with.
Yeah, and I'm taken aback by this younger generation's grasp of everything that's going on. Like they get it. They know what time it is. They know what's happening and why things are the way they are, and they're not afraid to speak out on it. They feel like it's their responsibility versus a choice, which I love to see. My son has impresses me every time I talk to him, just with his grasp of the information and the knowledge that he's gained. It's just so unbelievable that their head is on that path. Because I know when I was his age, I wasn't thinking about that stuff. So it just makes me proud of an entire generation, Andy. That as we talked about earlier, Andy, I want to talk about staying on those lines. How do us people in athletics, alumnus of college basketball programs or college sports in general, how do we help to close the gap, the disparity between men's and women's college athletics?
Yeah, I mean, you think progress is made, and then you watch what happened in March, and it's shocking. I mean, I sit here as an athletic director, and I go, how would that happen? I like, I'm not a genius, but you kind of go, how would you possibly think that this is equitable? And I think it comes down to respect. And I don't know if women's sports has gotten the respect that they deserve. I think we spend so much time, and I get it, the media and the money flows towards the male sports. And I understand that. But, these women, they're working just as hard or harder as the guys. And they deserve opportunities, and they deserve the basics, to allow them to compete. They shouldn't have to go online
Yeah.
and social media and shame the NCAA about, the gym. I mean, it's 2021, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure I thought we were past that, but what it means is that we have to keep people accountable. Hey, I'm not immune. I have to be held accountable. I have to hold myself accountable. And so I think moving forward, we have to hold
Right.
each other accountable. And if we do that, I think we can build a better opportunity for women's sports, and that you don't see these inequities that are just shameful, to be really honest. But it comes down to being accountable and being willing to look at yourself and say, you got to do better.
The thing that confuses me about that situation that we saw in the tournament, I guess I just don't have enough of an understanding about Title IX. I thought Title IX guaranteed certain things for women's sports, exactly the same thing that men's sports gets, but I guess it doesn't. Does Title IX need to be revised, revamped, so that it's mandatory that certain resources, certain funding, certain whatever you want to call it, the amenities of everything go to women's sports as well as men's sports?
Yeah, I think there's a common misconception that it's dollar for dollar. That's not the way it works. So if you spent $100 on men's basketball team, that you have to spend $100 on the women's team. So there's a more overarching. So you get into the weeds a little bit of how it works. So an athletic department would add up the total number of scholarships. So you could address it one way. So let's say you spent $90 on the women's team, but $100 on the men's team, but then you had a women's rowing team that you spent $200 on. So it's not dollar for dollar, sport
Mm,
by sport. So that's an interesting concept of, should that be a model that you look at? Um, I'm not so sure. I'm not saying it shouldn't, but I think probably we have to revisit it. We're going to be coming up on next year 50
mhm.
years of Title IX.
Yeah.
And hey, think about our Constitution. We put amendments in, we've changed things along the way. What they did in 1776 isn't exactly what it is in 2021. We've modified it. So
Mhm.
I think probably looking at it and going, what's working, maybe what's not working. Hey, maybe it's all working great, but just to sit there and say, well, this is what we've designed, so many things have changed, right? I mean, just in general around technology and
Yeah.
opportunities. that you couldn't
Yeah.
have seen in 1972 when Title IX was put into effect as a law. So I think this conversation around March Madness and the disparity between the men's and women's side, I think is going to help that conversation take place. Again, going back to your earlier question, we have to hold ourselves accountable, and we have to be honest about things and not just kind of turn our blind eye to it. And hey, no, we have to hold ourselves accountable, and leaders need to do that. So as a leader, I need to make sure that that voice, so to speak, is heard at the NCAA level. That myself and other athletic directors say, hey, wait a minute here. We're going to have another tournament next year in March. What are we going to do to make sure that hopefully we're not in a pandemic situation, but whatever that tournament looks like, that again, maybe it doesn't have to be dollar for dollar, but that it's equitable, meaning that if I was a female basketball player and I wanted to go work out, that I could get a reasonable workout in, not four dumbbells and, jumping rope. Like it's not even close. So what can we do to make sure that that's happening? I still don't even understand how it possibly could have happened. Again, I don't work for the NCAA. I am an athletic director, but they host those events, and I'm sure they're scratching their heads. Somebody there is going, wait a minute, how in the heck did that happen?
Yeah.
But it happened. So
It
we
was
can't
weird.
we can't turn a blind eye.
No, and people on the men's side need to speak up, bring light to these situations as well. It takes everyone, not just women's basketball, and that's why I've kind of taken it upon myself to provide a platform through KJ Live for plenty of women's basketball. I had Michaela Onyenwere, the number 6 pick in the draft. Corey Close was on my show. A number of other different people. Monique Billings. So plays for the Atlanta Dream. So I'm all for it. Andy, I got a couple more questions for you that are that I've always wondered. So one of them I've always wondered about Long Beach State. Just growing up in LA and competing against you guys in basketball, I always wondered, why don't you have a football program?
Yeah, so back in the day, we did, and pretty decent program. Put some guys in the NFL, and essentially what it came down to is funding. In 1991 was the year that it went away, and at that time, the coach was George Allen, who had coached the Washington football team, and so he had been in the NFL, and he was a big name, and he came to Long Beach State to kind of resurrect the program, and they had losing seasons, 4-7, 5-6, like that kind of stuff. And his first year, they flipped it to 6-5, and I think he did that in his second year as well. But he passed away suddenly, unfortunately, after his second year, and it sustained one more year. But really, the passing of George Allen was almost the death blow for the program. There had been a resurrection of interest and support for the program. And unfortunately, when he passed away, it kind of went back into the shadows a little bit. And essentially, what it came down to was the funding. And the university couldn't fund it to a point that was sustainable. And, they tried to pass a student referendum to even fund it, didn't get the number of votes that they needed.
Mm.
And during that time, you saw a lot of teams. Cal State Fullerton had a football team, and that went away. UC Santa Barbara had a football team, and they played at that FCS level, the lower level. But you saw a lot of teams in the early 90s go away. And it's really sad because you never want to see a sport cut. No, any sport, whether it's co-ed sailing or if it's football. Anytime that student athlete opportunity is taken away, it's a negative. That's at least 100 guys on a team who were working towards a degree as and part of a football team that maybe some of them stayed at school. I don't know, but I suspect a lot of them probably either transferred out, maybe to go play another place, or maybe they just went on and did something else. But I get that question asked a lot. If I had $1 for every time I got that question, we might have a football team. But it comes down to money because we just don't have the Pac-12 has those media rights deal, that each school is getting $25 million or whatever. We don't have that mechanism.
Yeah.
I think if there was a funding mechanism that football was sustainable and we could do it, our university would do it. But right now, we just don't have the mechanism to support such a program, because then you do get into the Title IX aspect. We would have to ramp up expenditures and opportunities for women. So you'd probably have to add some women's teams. And so you start looking at overall dollars and you just go, whoa, like what are we talking? Are we talking like another $10 million a year or something? And that's at the lower level of
Yeah.
FCS football, not even, BTS.
No, big time. That's a big time answer, Andy. Thank you for addressing that, because it's something I've always wondered. I figured it might have had something to do with funding, but it's nice to hear it from the horse's mouth on what's really happening over there at Long Beach State. Andy, we've talked about a lot of things today. I guess the one thing I want to try to get an understanding of is, how does the Long Beach State athletic director measure success of his athletic department?
Yeah, so my wife's a kindergarten teacher, so I try to keep things real simple. What I tell my staff every day in my office, behind my desk, I've got what our core three values are. And these are nothing that Andy came up with and invented himself. This is just watching, listening, and seeing what other people are doing and seeing what works. So the number one thing we're here to do is to provide that best possible experience in the classroom, in the field of competition. The second piece is that we want to build and sustain winning programs and compete for championships. And the third thing is we want to do things the right way, how we represent ourselves, how we go about our work. So when I look at measuring, we want success on the field of competition. This is Division One. We invest a lot of time, energy, and finances into this. So winning, on the field and, with the court, the pool, wherever you might be, that is a component that I look at as an athletic director to provide that overall experience. I don't want student athletes coming here and we lose games all the time. Like, that's not a great experience, right? I mean, I want them to win and win as much as possible. So winning is a component. Now, the even more, vital component is the academic success. We've done a great job here, and it's not due to Andy Fee. It's due to a lot of people. It takes a village to do this. And our academic success is phenomenal. Our graduation success rate is 91%. And that's like second or third in the state in terms of public institutions. I think maybe Cal and UCLA got us, maybe UC Davis, but we're in the top five for graduation success rate. And so when I look at that, that means we're doing the right thing. We're getting in the classroom. We're getting those degrees. We're having success. We're winning championships. We've won championships in men's volleyball. We're the defending back-to-back national champions in men's volleyball. Baseball, we've hosted regionals and super regionals. We've been to the College World Series, softball, soccer, tennis. We have a really robust program across our, what I call the Olympic sports. And, we've put someone in, we've had someone from Long Beach State in every Olympics, Summer Olympics, since 1952. So, we're churning out
Wow.
great success and stories that a lot of people don't even know about. But there's a really strong history here. But I look at that one loss record. Of course, I'm not going to lie. We want to win. We're competitive. We were talking about that earlier. We want to win. And then the
Yeah.
academic side of the
Yeah.
house. Are we tracking? Are we graduating? What does that look like? And honestly, that's what transforms lives. I mean, that experience, what you learn on the court, that's going to set you up for success. But that degree, that's going to be the launching pad. So that's what I look for.
Wow. No, that is, golly, the student athlete experience is so valuable, important to do it both ways. So you got to be on the court and you got to be in the classroom. You can't just do one or the other, because it's not going to make a lot of sense, and you won't achieve your fullest potential if it's one or the other. Andy Fee, thank you, my man, so much for joining KJ Live today. It's been about an hour. We talked about a lot of stuff. The episode will be up shortly on the iHeart Podcast Network. Andy, we appreciate your time today, my man, and hopefully we can do this again.
Definitely, Chris. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun from my side over here, and I wish you nothing but the best. Be well, be healthy, be safe.
and keep on running, my man. Keep getting them miles in. The miles won't run themselves.
No doubt.
All right, Andy. I'll talk to you soon. Talk to you later, my man.
Thank you. Be well.
All right.